Welcome back to another Reddit readings video. If you enjoy these stories, don't be scared to leave a like. Now, do be scared. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. My encounter with the would-be axe murderer in the middle of the woods. So, to preface, I would like to state that this story is probably going to read like the plot of a campy 1980s horror movie, and is going to be very long. However, this entire story is true, if not for being 5 miles from cell reception and the way the story ends. There would be a police report for verification. I will be changing names, locations, and some details in order to protect the privacy of the innocent. A buddy of mine and I try to camp twice a month now that I have a vehicle that can be trusted to get me to some of the more remote areas of our state. We planned a camping trip for this past weekend, 2/18/22/2022. We chose a fairly remote location we had been to the previous weekend. The previous weekend, we were the only people we'd seen within 1 mile of our camp spot. Friday night, we got there and set up. This story takes place Saturday night. It's about 9 p.m., so the sun is long gone and the moon hasn't quite risen yet. It's pitch black out, other than when our fire lights up. Suddenly, we hear a man screaming. We listen intently, silently sharing an anxious look. At first, we were hoping it was someone drunk and having a little too much fun. But it quickly becomes obvious this isn't fun party screaming. It isn't even like he's hurt. It sounds full of despair, anger, and anguish. I'm going to take a moment to remind you that this is at 9 p.m., pitch black night, in the middle of nowhere woods 5 miles from the nearest cell phone signal. We hadn't seen anyone in hours. The screaming continued for what felt like hours, but was probably about 5 solid minutes. We had no idea what to make of it and started feeling extremely paranoid. We gathered up anything remotely close to a weapon and tried to come up with explanations of the screaming while keeping our eyes on the forest around us. After about 15 tense minutes of fear-induced paranoia, I nearly fell out of my seat as I watched a flashlight and lantern slowly enter our camp. I greeted the stranger with a basic "how's it going?" Before he was even lit up by the fire. He responded quickly but flatly by asking if we could do him a favor. "That depends on the favor, my buddy," and I said in unison, obviously tense, holding our weapons close to us. The stranger proceeded to ask if he could hang out for a second by the fire. Given the 2 of us and 1 of him, plus our myriad of weapons gathered from around camp to within our arm's reach, we decided to agree and let him hang out. After a short second of awkward silence, I ask him what the hell is going on. He proceeds to tell me and my buddy that he was camping down the trail with his buddy, and that his buddy had snapped and tried to kill him. "Wait, what?" I said before the thought even finished processing in my head. "Is that the screaming we heard earlier?" The man slowly nods, staring blankly into the fire, and begins his story. "We were just hanging out, man. We came up earlier today and my buddy just freaked out. He started screaming and just wouldn't stop. Then, he attacked me. He lunged at me, and I told him to just back off and chill, you know. Well, he kept coming after me and it started getting pretty violent and I'm pretty sure he was going to kill me, so I grabbed my car keys, the lights, and ran. I don't know what to do, man. He chased me when I ran and I didn't know what to do. We don't have firearms or anything, but we do have a hatchet." My buddy and I look at each other for a second, completely astonished. Then, something horrible dawned on me. "Wait, he chased you? Like, he's on his way here, right now?" The man just slowly nods in reply, and right on cue, like some terrible horror movie comes to life, we hear screaming from maybe 30 to 40 feet from our camp, down on the main trail. "I just want your FCKING, balance, Gary. I want your balance. GARYYYYY. Gary, where are you? Where? GARYYYY. I'd never in my life heard a man scream like this. I've never heard anything like it in my life. It was a brutal, guttural scream that was shrill to the ears yet deep in pitch. The sound of someone gone completely mad. And the way he said the stranger's name would switch erratically from long and sing-songy to short, guttural punches of sound. We killed our lights, became silent, and listened. By some miracle, the madman didn't notice our camp and continued walking down the trail, screaming the whole way. We ended up chatting with who we'll call Gary for hours, listening to the screaming getting further and further. Come to find out, they had taken 4.5 grams of magic mushrooms each, and his buddy, who we'll call Ty, was a coworker of his and was fine for 3.5 hours, then suddenly snapped. It seemed as though Ty thought he could kill Gary and steal his good trip. We hear the screams get further and further for over 2 hours. By this time it's 11 p.m. The moon is starting to come out, and it's below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Ty had no jacket or flashlight according to Gary. My buddy and I were way too drunk to drive out of camp to get cell service, as it was snowy and icy, and required 2-3 miles of highway driving after getting off the trail, and Gary was still slightly feeling the effects of weed and mushrooms, so he couldn't drive either. We had to make the decision to let the guy wander, hope he sobered up, and could find his way back. And he did. Oh, he did, right into our camp. We hear yelling after about an hour of no screams, maybe 30 to 50 feet from camp again. Hey, help, please help me, I'm lost. And we can tell the man's walking from the woods into our camp. We tell Gary to hide just in case and greet the man with me carrying my 12-gauge shotgun and my .40 calories pistol holstered, my buddy carrying his AK-47 style rifle and his 2 9mm Glocks holstered, and with our flashlights on our brightest settings in his face. He was about 62-63 and approximately 300 pounds. We talked to him, decided he was calm enough to walk with, and walked him back to his camp. He seemed really remorseful, said he blacked out and didn't remember anything, and had a falling out with his buddy. We escorted him back to his camp down the trail, returned and told Gary that Ty seemed cool, and if anything else happened to scream and come running, we would come out and help him out. It ended up being a happy ending. We made friends with Gary, and I got his phone number to make sure the next day he got back into town safely, back to his wife and kid, and we're actually planning a camping trip with him soon. But Ty, who wandered screaming like a deranged maniac into the forest, potentially wielding a hatchet to murder your friend to steal his good trip, or whatever it is your psychosis-filled mind was thinking, for the love of God, let's not meet again. The laboratory in the forest. Every summer my family and I venture north for several weeks, as do most other families in my state. The town we visited was not far from another sprawling town on a lake. Despite my overall disdain for most people and traffic, the area was pleasant most of the time. Additionally, 2 friends of mine also visited the area, and we would meet with each other at least 2 or 3 days out of the 2 weeks I was there. The names of my friends are Osi and Jack, and we are all the same age and live in the same town back home, so we know one another quite well. Anyway, one evening when I rode my bike over to the general store where we would all meet, only Jack was there. For context, Jack is always 5 to 10 minutes late, and Osi was always there at least 20 minutes before me, seeing as though he could just walk from where his family's cabin was to the store, so this took me slightly by surprise. So I asked Jack where Osi was, and he said, "Didn't you get the message?" He said he found something and was going to take a while before he got back. I was confused when he had stated this, as I did not remember getting a message from our group chat. But sure enough, when I opened my messages, there was one that wasn't opened. The message reads something along the lines of, "I'm going to be a little late. I found something really cool." So me and Jack waited about an hour in front of the store waiting for Osi when he finally showed up, but he didn't have his bike, which I found downright weird, seeing as though he cherished that thing. Before we could say anything to Osi, he immediately said, "You guys have to check out this building I found. Come on, let's go." I asked him where his bike was, and he just responded with, "It's back at my cabin. You probably want to leave your bikes here if you want to get to the place I found." So we obliged and chained our bikes to a lamppost. We followed Osi down the main road until we came up to a gravel side street with a no outlet sign. Osi pointed at the gravel road and said, "Down here, it's going to be past the end of the road, so expect some hiking." When we came onto the gravel road, I noticed nearly instantly that there were very few homes on this road, which was bizarre for such a well-populated area at the time of year we were visiting. About a quarter of the way down this decrepit and unkempt road, at least by Osi's measurement, Jack asked what this building was that Osi had found, and Osi responded by saying it was an abandoned and odd-looking gray brick building with a metal roof shaped like a half circle, similar to a greenhouse. I asked if he had entered the building yet, and Osi said that he tried the front door, but it got stuck on something. After Osi had said this, Jack asked if Osi knew for certain that this building was abandoned, and Osi responded by saying that some of the windows were broken, and the entire back end of the house next to it was destroyed. After Osi had mentioned this, we all agreed that if we can get into this facility, we can make it a hideout where Osi and Jack could smoke, seeing as though I don't, but I thought it would be fun to have that sort of thing nonetheless. After about another hour of walking, we finally reached the end of the road. At this point, it was 7 o'clock in the evening and it was becoming noticeably darker under the canopy of trees on this essentially destitute road, so I was beginning to have second thoughts, but I kept my mouth shut because OC wasn't the best person to argue with, if you catch my meaning. So we proceeded into the woods for what I could guess was about a mile when we stumbled into a clearing with a big bungalow-style house and the building that OC described to us to the left of it. We waited for, give or take, 3 minutes to see if the coast was clear and then made our way to the building. OC's discernment almost precisely fit the appearance of the facility. It was roughly 10 feet tall with a curved roof made with sheet steel, not unlike what you would find on barns or utility sheds. OC was now excited, and when he went up to the door he motioned for us to help him open it. So that is just what we did, and to this day I regret ever going anywhere near that clearing. We opened the door with relative ease, but what came next was completely unexpected. Something fell from the table blocking the door and it sounded vaguely wet, and when OC had shined his flashlight in the general direction of where the sound occurred, we saw, and I am not joking, a severed alligator head with strings of flesh and muscle still attached. At about this time the smell of the interior hit all of us and I vomited, with OC and Jack proceeding to gag. Mind you, we were in a place nowhere near a natural habitat for alligators, about 1,000 miles to be more exact, so this was beyond weird to just find the head one laying in a building on the other side of the continent. OC, being as stubborn as ever, shined his light even further into the building, and all we saw were pieces of various reptiles all over the place. We had also seen syringes and bats on long tables, along with blood smeared across most of the surfaces that weren't covered with a multitude of reptile parts. At the moment we opted to get out of there, Jack whispered, "What the fuck?" At this, OC and I turned to where Jack was looking and found that one of the lights was on in one of the downstairs rooms of the seemingly abandoned house, and someone was walking to the front door. What looked to be a man stepped out and issued a nearly deafening scream that sent us running through the woods back to the road. None of us mentioned what had happened to our parents, and it has been 5 years since this has ensued. Not a day passes where I don't think about it. Edit. There have been several complaints pertaining to my lack of elaboration as to what had happened after the events of the story. All I will state here is that roughly 2 or so weeks after this had occurred, I did, at least reveal to our parents what happened that night. I had only done so as my parents can be rather stringent at times, and I did not wish to be punished for something that was otherwise a freak and arbitrary mistake. Additionally, someone within the comments posted 2 links to the general area of where me and my friends were. It may be the place we were, but again I do not precisely remember where the facility and house were in the forest. The Ballad of Steve. The story I'm going to tell you happened over the course of roughly 5 or 6 years. Names have, of course, been changed. When I was in college I met this dude named Steve. He was good-looking, well-spoken, and confident. He was instantly well-liked by most of the people that he met, but was a bit intimidating to me at first due to the fact that he was pretty jacked and didn't speak to me a whole lot in the beginning. Here I was, an 18 going on 19 fat kid with an inferiority complex that made me act out to get attention. I would wear women's clothes to class to get a laugh, or interrupt the professors with a witticism here and a joke there, again for a laugh. I was that kid, the one that people didn't exactly dislike, but weren't too eager to hang out with because I could be a bit much at times. This did nothing to help with my feelings of inadequacy, but I didn't make the connection there until a couple years later. Steve and I didn't exactly become fast and hard friends, because I got pretty drunk at a party once and he decided instantly that I was annoying. Still, we were civil to each other as we were in the same department and had a couple of classes together. We kind of hung with different crowds too, even inside the department. Steve had recently been kicked out of boot camp in the military. He told everyone that it was because he had injured himself badly enough that he had been discharged. But that wasn't true. However, we'll get to that part later. Cut to about 3 or 4 months after my first meeting Steve, and I had been invited by a mutual friend, Corey, to come to a small get-together at his place where he incidentally was roommates with Steve. I told Corey that I was kind of wary of Steve and felt like he didn't like me, to which he replied that I was right and that was why he wanted me to come over. He wanted me and Steve to get to know each other better because he was positive we would become friends if we just gave each other a chance. After some more prodding, I finally agreed. When I arrived at Corey's house, there were maybe 3 other people from the department there. It seemed like a pretty chill setting. There was some alcohol being passed around and I drank a little bit, but I kept my distance from Steve. After a couple hours and quite a few beers, I was starting to feel pretty good. Someone brought out a couple of joints and those started getting passed around the room. When one of them made its way to me, Steve spoke up. Don't bother passing to him," he said with a mocking laugh. "He's a goody-good." I'm not exactly sure why he said or even thought that. It might have been because I once mentioned in passing that I had never smoked weed before. Regardless of why he said it, it made me mad that he was making fun of me. So I did what any 19-year-old drunk dude would do. I grabbed the joint and took the biggest hit I could possibly take. This, as anyone who has ever smoked knows, is a huge mistake for a marijuana virgin when quality kush is handed to him. After my coughing fit and all of the laughter at my expense had subsided, I looked at Steve challengingly and he just kind of nodded in my direction before resuming his conversation. Now, no one told me that you shouldn't mix alcohol and weed. Had I stopped there, I would have been fine. However, I continued to drink, which exacerbated all the stuff that comes along with being high. By the time I knew I was high, I was starting to get paranoid. I am, or at least was, a bit of a hypochondriac. Dry mouth felt like my tongue was swelling up and my throat was starting to close. The feeling of almost weightlessness that sometimes accompanies being high made me feel like I wasn't anchored to the floor anymore. The time dilation that you experience with weed made me feel like I was literally frozen in time. I started to panic. By this point, everyone else had gone home and it was just me, Steve, and Corey. I explained to Corey that I thought I was allergic to weed because I wasn't feeling right, and oddly enough, Steve asked me to explain what I was feeling. When I did, he walked me through all of it and calmed me down. Once I was calm, he put a controller in my hands and we played video games until I sobered up enough to drive. It was honestly really cool of him, and it was the start of one of the best friendships I've ever had. Until it became the worst, most abusive relationship I've ever been in. Over the next year or so, Steve and I became really close. I considered him one of my best friends. Being around him was almost like a drug. He just had this way of making you feel like you mattered. I know now that he was a complete sociopath, but you don't really see those signs until it's too late. He harassed me until I started working out with him, which meant I had more energy and confidence in myself. I got into pretty decent shape. I wasn't ripped. I wasn't even what most people would call fit. But I wasn't the fat kid anymore either. He would come to my house and force me to go out and do stuff. Before I became friends with him, I was kind of a loner and a hermit. We would go to the lake just to dick around, or go hiking in the woods, or any number of outdoorsy type activities. For the first time in years, I had confidence in myself and I was actually quite happy. Enter Lisa. Lisa was the love of my life. The one who got away, or rather the one that I stupidly dumped twice over a 5-year relationship because I was scared. She's not a huge part of the Ballad of Steve, but she plays a role. She had come to my hometown to go to school, and she had a boyfriend back home, but we clicked immediately. I know you're wondering, and no, we didn't hook up or anything while she was with him. She made her intentions toward me clear, and I made it clear that nothing would happen while she was dating someone else. She told me that she had been considering breaking things off with him as he was a bit controlling and dickish, and the next day she walked up to me and kissed me full on the mouth. When I started to push her away, she laughed and said, "I broke up with Jason last night. You're mine now." I smiled back and our relationship began. I apologize for getting into these details that have nothing to do with Steve. It was just an immensely happy time of my life, and I never would have had the confidence to flirt with Lisa in the first place if it weren't for Steve. The next year after Lisa and I got together was rather uneventful. I will admit there were some red flags with Steve that I either didn't see or just outright ignored. Looking back on it now, one of the most obvious was that one day I was hanging out with Lisa when Steve showed up. She had always gotten a bad vibe from him, rightly so. And so when he showed up, she left to go to class 45 minutes early. Watching her walk away, Steve said, "I could take her from you if I wanted." I gave him an incredulous look, slightly panicking that this man who called himself my friend might actually want to, and be able to, sway Lisa to date him instead. He laughed at my expression and added, "Don't worry, I don't want her. She's like a 6 at best. She's perfect for you, but I'd prefer my bitches a little thinner and much hotter. Just thought you should know that if I wanted, I could take her from you." It should be noted that Lisa was thin, if curvaceous, and absolutely gorgeous in a very classical way. I am now convinced that Steve actually was attracted to her, but he saw himself as the alpha and needed to assert his dominance over me. One of his perceived betas. I'm ashamed to admit that it worked. I did get angry and told him not to talk to her about my girlfriend in such a gross manner. But once he gave a half-hearted apology, I just kind of shrugged it off. The next year there were even more red flags that I chose to ignore. I know the story is moving rather quickly right now, but those first couple of years weren't really that bad. Yes, Steve was starting to show his true colors, but the really horrible shit was still to come. Also, if you're keeping track, I was at a 2-year college for 3 years. That's just how long it took me to get my associate's degree. That's neither here nor there. Steve started dating one of the freshmen in our department. I heard from others that the relationship was incredibly psychologically abusive on his end, but I kept brushing it off because the girl he was dating hadn't spoken up and Steve was a good guy, right? I mean, I hadn't witnessed it. Other people must just be misinterpreting Steve's unusual sense of humor in a way that painted him in a bad light in their mind. I was unaware at the time that of course she wouldn't speak out against him because that's what psychological abuse is. It's gaslighting and insults and ensuring that the victim believes themselves to be absolutely worthless and deserving of the treatment that they receive. During the end-of-year departmental party, I proposed to Lisa, and she said yes. When Lisa and I graduated from the college with an associate's degree, we decided to move to a new school together. Despite the fact that our relationship grew stronger than ever without Steve in our lives, a dot that I didn't connect due to still being firmly in his psychotic grasp, the college we decided to transfer to was absolute garbage, and after the year was over, we had decided to transfer again to a better and cheaper school, this time about an hour away. Coincidentally, it was the same school that Steve now attended. That summer, Lisa moved back to her hometown while transitioning between schools, and I ended things with her for the first time over the phone. Shitty, I know, but we were like 5 hours apart since I had stayed behind to live on campus and work, and neither of us could find the time to visit the other. The only reason I can logically come up with is that I was scared of the commitment. I've always said that when I marry, I want it to be for life. I got in my own head and started to worry about whether or not Lisa was the person I really wanted to spend the rest of my life with. When I moved to the new city, Steve helped me get an apartment in the same complex where he and Corey, the friend from earlier, both lived. We were in separate buildings, but the apartments were set up in a way that the courtyard between the two buildings was only like 40 feet across. I could actually see into Steve's basement apartment window from my second floor one when we both had our blinds open. There were many times that I would glance out the window while playing video games or something, and Steve would catch my eye and wave me over, so I would obediently turn my game off and head over to his place to smoke a little weed and watch one of his 4 DVDs for the billionth time. During this time in my life, I became a major alcoholic. I'm fairly certain that Steve realized this was happening, but said nothing because he wanted to be able to hold it over me later. He may have contributed to my alcoholism a bit. He began to use the same bullying tactics he had once employed to get me to work out and go do things. This time he was using them to get me to go out drinking. If I told him that I had class early the next day or homework that needed doing, he would just wave it off and tell me we would be back in plenty of time for me to get my homework done or get plenty of sleep. We would often stay out until 2 in the morning when the bars closed, or later if he met someone cool and decided we were going to go to their house to hang for a bit afterward. If I said I didn't have money, he would promise to pay for me. At the end of the night, I would get a bill I could barely afford, and he would explain that clearly he meant he would pay for the first couple of rounds, and if I drank more than that, it was my fault. Several times I had to borrow money from him to pay rent, which further put me in his control. I would like to take a brief break and address the elephant in the room. I realized that every single one of the previously mentioned problems stemmed from me. I could have moderated my drinking. I could have told him no when he asked me to go out. I could have realized sooner that he was never truly going to pay my bar tab or that we weren't going to be home early. I take responsibility for all of these things. That being said, something you have to understand about Steve is that he would gaslight and make me feel like I was being a bad friend if I told him no, despite having a very valid reason for the refusal. What I'm trying to do by telling you this part is point out that he was never the good friend that I thought he was, or he would have pointed out that I was drinking too much. Would it have stopped me, as I know now from the numerous attempts by another, really true friend? No, it wouldn't have. But at least in hindsight, I would be able to say, you know, Steve tried to get me to stop drinking. He was a good friend. Back to the story. Some few months after moving to the new city, Steve introduced me to a friend of his from out of town, Jennifer. She was a very pretty woman with dyed red hair, styled into a pixie cut. She was thin, with an athletic build and a gorgeous face. She was honestly every straight man's dream. Not only that, but she was intelligent, funny, quick-witted, compassionate, and kind. I instantly developed a crush on her, but I was sure she was out of my league. I asked Steve if she was seeing anyone though, because at this point I still had some confidence. He told me she wasn't and asked if I liked her. I said yes, and he assured me that he would try to get a feel for what she thought of me. Cut to a few days later, and Steve is now dating her. This confused the shit out of me, because when he introduced us they kept making jokes about how neither of them was really interested in the other and they would never work as a couple. I think even back then I knew that he had done his psychological fuckery to get her to date him so he could, once again, assert his dominance over me. I shrugged it off, happy that my friend had finally found a girl to make him forget that freshman he had been dating a couple years ago. He had constantly moaned about missing her when she finally got the courage to tell him to fuck off one night after he had called her fat. She was maybe 95 pounds. Over the next few weeks, I started to notice that Jen was looking more and more exhausted and haggard. When I asked if she was okay, she would just smile and assure me that her workload was just getting to her. We had started to become friends, so I asked her not to hesitate in coming to me if there was anything I could do to help her out. She thanked me for the kind gesture, but again said she would be fine. I would later find out that Steve was treating her just the same as he had treated his previous girlfriend. She apparently told Steve about my offer for help, thinking it was sweet that I wanted to help her. And as you might guess, Steve flew off the fucking handle. I had never seen him so angry. He came to my apartment banging on the door fit to break it down and screaming at me to get my two-faced ass out in the hallway so he could kill me. I didn't know it at the time, but Steve had started taking steroids, which explained part of his unfounded rage. After nearly an hour of him pacing my living room, threatening me and yelling loud enough to wake the whole damn neighborhood, I was finally able to convince him that my intentions were nothing but friendly toward Jen now. Bro code dictated that even if the two of them broke it off, I wasn't going to pursue her since she had dated one of my best friends. Once he finally believed that I wasn't trying to stuff his girl like a Thanksgiving turkey as he put it, it was like a switch was flipped. Suddenly we were best friends again, and his earlier rage seemed to have been forgotten as if it had never happened. He dumped Jen shortly after. My guess is that he realized I had no romantic interest in her anymore, and therefore couldn't use his relationship with her to needle me and control me. I only saw her a handful of times after that, but the last time I saw her she looked so much happier. Yet another sign about Steve I either didn't see or chose to ignore. About a month after the yelling incident, Lisa and I got back together. She was incredibly distrustful and wary of me at this point, and rightly so. I had broken her heart for no other reason than that I was an idiot. Over time, she began to trust me with her emotions again. This was a mistake on her part, and I don't mean that to sound cruel. Perhaps I had picked up some things from Steve. I know that I was fairly manipulative. I am more ashamed of that than I can ever portray with words. I hate myself to this day for some of the ways I treated her during our second stint as a couple. Lisa was still uncomfortable around Steve, and she would often leave if we were hanging out and Steve showed up. He never seemed to catch on that she didn't want to be around him. Things were made far worse when we went to a house party one night, and Steve groped her. Again, I am incredibly ashamed to admit what I did when she came to me in tears of rage and disgust and told me what happened. I am ashamed because the first thing out of my mouth was, "Steve wouldn't do that. Maybe you just misunderstood what was going on." He smacked my ass and grabbed my chest. She practically yelled at me. "All right," I said. "I'll go talk to him." I should have just cut him out right then and there. I should have taken Lisa home. I should have went and knocked Steve the fuck out. I should have done a lot of things, but I've always been a people pleaser, and Steve brought this out in me in the worst way. When I asked Steve about the situation, he told me that he had grabbed her waist to get around her in the kitchen, which was crowded, and that he had accidentally brushed her breasts while reaching for a bottle of rum. I fucking believed him. I went back to Lisa and conveyed what had been told to me. After a lot more enraged tears and yelling, she left. Why she didn't just dump my stupid, harassment apologist, victim-blaming ass right then I still don't know. When Steve appeared a few minutes later and I explained what had happened, he put on a faux sympathetic face and said with a chuckle, "Man, fuck that cunt. Let's find you a hot, drunk bitch who wants to give a blowjob." Even back then I knew that that was a huge red flag, and I do not have sex with drunk women. But I still ignored the signs. I didn't cheat, but I ignored the signs. Lisa didn't speak to me for a week, and she was right to do so. She should have never spoken to me again. For the next few months, things with Steve were a bit strained and we didn't hang out much. Things with Lisa improved again now that Steve wasn't around as much. We were even talking about moving in together. This would not ever happen because I was going to break up with her again before long. I didn't know I was going to do this at the time, but it was going to happen. When it did happen, there were no tears like the last time. There was no pleading that we could make it work. Lisa simply fixed me with an emotionless, almost dead gaze and said, "My sister told me not to trust you again. I should have listened. Get your shit and get out of my apartment." Now I really wish that she had just left it at that. But over the next couple of years we would go on to have a few stints as friends with benefits, as we both knew what the other wanted in bed, and it was just easier for both of us, I think, being highly sexual beings, to find comfort with each other when we wanted sex. I obviously obliged. There were no feelings in it for her. It was just sex. We never got back together, but we became a sort of facsimile of friends again after a while. Shortly after our breakup, I became immensely depressed. I didn't realize that it was because I was still in love with Lisa. Why would I be? I had broken things off with her. Regardless, I started drinking even more and stopped working out. I started regaining all the weight I had lost my freshman year of college, and Steve noticed, often remarking that I was a fat fuck. I never really minded it, because I was used to my weight being the butt of every other joke. Besides, he always said it with a laugh to let me know that he was only joking, the way good friends always insult each other, right? At the same time, I started hanging out with him again. One day he came to me asking if I wanted to move into a house with him. I politely declined because I liked living alone, and my rent was relatively cheap for where I live. He called me a pussy and got unreasonably angry, saying that I owed him everything. He proceeded to scream at me for half an hour. He didn't speak to me for 3 days, but did eventually calm down. He never apologized for his ridiculous outburst though. When he moved out, another mutual friend took his apartment after having just gone through a bad breakup of his own, and I started hanging out with this new friend, Mark, quite a bit since he was just across the courtyard and Steve was a couple miles away. During this time I met a man through Mark who would go on to become one of the 2 best friends that I have ever had, and one of the most amazing people I've ever known. Enter Nick. Remember the friend from earlier who I said regularly tried to get me to stop drinking? That's Nick. He was and is a man who, for some reason, I never want to disappoint. Even today, being mostly sober, a huge part of what keeps me from drinking is the idea that if Nick found out, I would be more ashamed of myself than if I publicly shit my pants in front of the woman of my dreams. Personally, that to me is a mark of a true friend, mostly because Nick never asked for or expected me to feel this way. In fact, I think he's a little uncomfortable with it, but it's not something I can just turn off. Nick and I hit it off fairly quickly and started hanging out regularly. It was with Nick and his circle of friends, all of whom I proudly now call my own friends, that a Dungeons and Dragons group was started that lasted for nearly 4 years. Nick plays a bigger, if not huge, part in this story later. Things continued this way for maybe half a year before I finally decided to take Steve up on his offer and move into the house with him, mostly because money was tight and my bills would go down. His current roommates had moved away for whatever reason and he had a couple of vacancies. I took one room, and a friend of his from when he was in boot camp, Greg, took the other. For a while, things were awesome. Steve had apparently become Catholic. He was off the juice. It was like I had my old friend back from the days when we had first started becoming chummy. He, Greg, and I would often go on road trips or go out to bars or just go to some outdoor attractions around the city and walk around. Now, remember that I said that Steve had been discharged from the military and claimed that it was due to an injury. Turns out that was not true at all. One night while Steve was at work, Greg and I were hanging out with some beers and somehow the topic came up. You know he was crazy, yeah? Greg asked. What do you mean? I said. He was kicked out before he finished boot camp. Really? He told me that he suffered some kind of injury and they had to let him go. After I said this, an incredulous look came over Greg's face and he turned slowly to look at me. He then proceeded to tell me that what Steve had told me was an utter lie. He told me that Steve had reason to suspect that his then wife was cheating on him and had been overheard by a commanding officer saying that when he finished with boot camp he was going to murder them both. And the daughter that he and his wife He had been given an in-depth psychological evaluation and been discharged essentially for being too insane for the military. I later confirmed this with some of Steve's childhood friends. At this point, I was starting to realize who Steve really was, thinking back on some of the interactions I had had with him. Unfortunately, I was stupidly loyal to someone I perceived to be a good friend. At some point, I had invited Nick to come over and hang out to play video games and whatnot. And when Steve met Nick, he immediately called him fat. Now, Nick was at the time a large man. He has since made enormous strides in his fitness journey. Shout out to Nick for your hard work if you're reading this. He looked great. Regardless, I remember the look of utter disbelief on Nick's face, but I defended Steve by saying that was just how he made friends. If he wasn't calling you names, then it meant he didn't like you. By the way, can we stop that shit? Treating people like shit as a way to break the ice is fucking terrible. I'm guilty of it in the past, and I hate that I used to do it. Anyway, not relevant. I could tell Nick was skeptical, but he just kind of went with it. I think he kind of resented me for not defending him, but he never said so. I don't blame him if he did. A few weeks after the conversation with Greg, Steve had a friend of his from out of town stay with us for a weekend. Greg was out of town for work or something. I forget the details as they aren't important. Before this friend of Steve's arrived, he told me that she was fat, but pretty, and if I wanted to bone down with her, I had his blessing. This did not sit well with me, not only because of how he described her, which I learned wasn't true when she arrived, but because he felt the need to give his permission for two of his friends to have sex with each other. I kept my mouth shut, though. I forget the woman's name, but she was a very pretty woman. She was curvaceous, but in no way fat. I was confused as to why Steve would describe her as such. She and I got along really well from the start. That night, she and Steve slept together. Again, I'm fairly certain he slept with her because he could tell I was taking a liking to her. I wasn't falling over myself to get into a relationship with her, but I did like her quite a bit. Steve had to once again assert his dominance over me. The next day we all had lunch at a local restaurant, and Steve essentially left his friend and myself to drive his car back to the house while he wandered off to do God's know what. I was infuriated that he would do that. Not necessarily the leave us part, but the fact that his friend had come to town specifically to visit him and he just bailed on her with no real reason. She and I spent the day watching movies and playing video games. We talked quite a bit about Steve as he was our one common link, and a lot of things came to light about Steve that I won't mention here simply because I don't want to be typing this for the next 2 weeks. I texted Steve multiple times throughout the day asking where he was. He didn't respond until about midnight when I sent a text telling him it was kind of shitty of him to just leave his friend with me when she had come to see him. The text I got back just read, "Mind your fucking business, fatty. I'll be home when I get home." He finally rolled up around 10 the next morning as his friend was getting ready to leave. He was driving a motorcycle that I had never seen before. He barely said goodbye to the woman as she was leaving, and when the door was shut, I rounded on him. "Where the fuck were you, dude?" I demanded, feeling myself getting angrier by the word at what he had done. Not that it's any of your fucking business, but I was helping a friend bury a body. He shot back as he walked into his room. I knew instantly that this was a lie. I had this intuition when it came to Steve. I could almost always tell when he was lying, and this one was just so outlandish that I didn't even need to consider it to know it was absolute bullshit. "No, you fucking weren't," I said under my breath. "What was that, fatty?" he said, coming back into the room shirtless and getting in my face. I gently pushed him away from me and he looked utterly dumbfounded. He couldn't believe I would ever stand up to him like this. I said, "You're lying," I retorted quickly, enunciating. "But if you want to treat your friends like shit when they travel 4 hours just to hang out with you for a couple of days, then be my guest." We stood there glaring at each other for a few seconds before he deflated and looked slightly ashamed, which shocked the hell right out of me. "I was with a girl I've been dating," he said softly. "So you invited a friend to stay with us," I said, my anger rising again. "Cheated on your girlfriend with her, bailed on us, and then fucking lied to me about it. Fuck you, you fucking douchebag." I turned on my heel and stormed up to my room. I'm fairly certain Steve threw something at me but missed, because I heard a thump on the wall just to the left of the doorway as I walked through. I didn't stop to find out. I didn't see or speak to Steve for a couple of days after that. It wasn't until Greg came home from his trip and noticed that we weren't spending time together and were acting coldly toward one another that our friendship started to repair a bit. Most of that was due to Greg yelling at us that he wasn't going to live with a couple of bitches who couldn't get their shit together and act like adults. Despite our relationship repairing slightly, things were never really the same after that. Over the next few months, Steve started to sell drugs and always kept a loaded gun in the house. I specifically remember him telling me one day that some guy was going to be coming over to give him some money that he was owed, and if he showed up while Steve was at work, I was supposed to take the money, count it, and put it on his bedroom desk. I didn't know he was dealing at the time, and so assumed it was just a guy who owed him money. I just agreed and went back to playing my video game as he left for work. Steve got home from work before the guy showed up, and when there was a knock on the door, Steve came out of his bedroom with his gun in hand and held a finger to his lips. He opened the door to reveal a man standing on the porch with a wad of cash in hand. Steve immediately pointed the gun in his face, cocked the hammer back, and started screaming at him to drop the fucking money on the ground and get the fuck off his porch. As the dude was fleeing in terror, Steve yelled after him that if he ever saw him again, he would kill him. Of course, I was immediately distressed by what I had just witnessed, but I was equally terrified. When he turned to me with a huge grin after collecting the money from the porch and closing the door, I just gave a weak smile and ignored the whole thing. I learned later that he was back on steroids when this happened. During this time, Steve would regularly come home late at night, 3 sheets to the wind, ranting about one ethnic group or another. The one that sticks out in my mind the most was when he stumbled and so drunk that he could barely string together a coherent thought. He was yelling about globalism and how the Chinese were trying to take over the world. He mumbled a string of words I couldn't make out, then shouted clear as day, "Pingling," followed by another string of unintelligible bullshit, and finally "FUCKIN our daughters." As the last word left his lips, he immediately fell to the floor and began to sob. I had no idea what to do. If I tried to help him, I knew he would get violent toward me. In the end, I did nothing. I just went to my room. A few weeks after that particularly lovely incident, Steve and I got into an argument about something that I can't remember. He stormed off to his room, and I thought it was over. I knew from experience that given time and distance he would calm down. He would never apologize, but at least the situation would de-escalate. I was wrong this time. 10 minutes later, he came crashing back into the living room, gun in hand, and pointed it in my face. He was yelling that if I wasn't going to respect him, that he might as well just kill me. "You're not going to shoot me," I said far more calmly than I felt. Inside, I was shitting my pants, despite the fact that I did honestly believe he wouldn't shoot me. I had been around guns before, but never had I had one pointed at me. "Yeah," he said. "Why do you think that?" "I know it," I replied. "I know you're not going to shoot me because I'm one of the few real friends you have left." He seemed to consider this for a moment, and finally lowered the gun. His face was still murder incarnate, but at least the gun wasn't pointed at me. "Can you move, man?" I asked. "I'm trying to watch Netflix." He continued to stare at me for a long while, seeming to be internally fighting with himself, before finally stomping back to his room. I didn't see him again for the rest of the night. A few days later, Steve and Greg asked me to sit down when I came home from my 3rd double in a row at the restaurant where I work. I asked why, and they said we needed to talk about me living there. I told them there was no need. I was moving out. They seemed satisfied with this, and I went to my room to get some much-needed sleep. As a side note, as I was moving out, I accidentally broke the handle off of the storm door, and Steve lost his mind, screaming at me and calling all kinds of names, including the N-word. I assured him that I would replace it, but he just kept calling me names. Nick was helping me move out at the time, and once we were away from the house, he gave me a look that spoke volumes. "I know," I said. "I know. Part of the reason I'm moving out." "I didn't say anything," he replied. "You didn't have to," I said. This was the point that I finally snapped and realized that Steve was nothing but a toxic piece of shit. It took someone I hadn't known for very long giving me a single fucking look for that puzzle piece to finally fall into place and make me go, "Fuck this bag of dicks." After I moved out, I only saw Steve once more. I was coming out of class on the university campus, and he drove up on his motorcycle and started trying to make conversation. But I just made some lame excuse about needing to get to work or home or something and walked away. About a year later, I blocked Steve completely on all social media when he commented on a Facebook post and called my mom a cunt. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. About a year after that, Nick and I were at the mall. Being in a bit of a time crunch and needing things from different stores, we decided to head different directions and meet up in the food court. I finished what I needed to do first and was standing in front of the Dairy Queen waiting for Nick to meet me when I got a phone call from him. "What's up?" I said by way of answering. "I just saw Steve," he said without preamble. He was going into the store I was coming out of. He didn't need to tell me which Steve. He knew most of the worst of what I've put in this story by this point, although I'm sure some of these anecdotes would surprise even him. My heart seemed to seize and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I hadn't seen or spoken to Steve in over 2 years, and the thought of coming face to face with him now filled me with dread. "Hello, are you there?" "Yeah," I said, finally finding my voice. "I'll meet you at the car. That's why I told you. I'll be out in a bit." I practically sprinted to the car and just kept praying to whatever gods might exist that Nick would be out soon. I went over and over in my mind what I would say or do if Steve showed up. Luckily, I never had to find out what I would have actually done or said, because Nick appeared pretty quick and we left. That was the last I heard of Steve. The incidents that are portrayed in this story are not everything that happened over the course of my relationship with Steve. There were more, including more death threats, a physical altercation, more name-calling, and insurance fraud that Steve decided to rope me into without my knowledge. These were just the worst or more poignant incidents that needed to be told in order to paint Steve as he truly exists. Were I to tell the entire story of Steve, it would likely wind up being a whole-ass novel. A lot of it, while terrible, isn't really all that relevant in the grand scheme of things. So there's the Ballad of Steve. Now, I know at this point you're wondering to yourself why I didn't just leave Steve in the dust a long time ago. Why didn't I just walk away from that friendship at the first sign of trouble? Well, there are a few reasons. First and foremost, as I said, Steve was a sociopath. Sociopaths are extremely versed in making people trust them, even as they treat them like trash. Not to mention he gaslit me and made me feel as though a lot of the smaller incidents were my fault. That in turn led to me believing the bigger problems were my fault. This is how psychological abusers keep control. Secondly, I am a loyal friend to a fault. I will see the best in the people I care about even as they stab me in the back and beat me down. This is a fault of mine that I am working on. I only saw the terrible in Steve when he treated another friend I was loyal to like shit. Third, a part of me was terrified to walk away. There was a piece of me that was scared, and sometimes still is since I blocked him, that he would get it in his head to kill me because I rejected him. This is again part of the conditioning that abusers do. Regardless, I am much happier now and glad that the whole ordeal is behind me. I'd like to end on this final note. If you are in a relationship of any kind where you are starting to see red flags, don't ignore them like I did. I explained away a lot of the red flags that Steve was waving proudly, and I regret it to this day. I was lucky and got out of the most toxic friendship I've ever known with only some psychological trauma and having my confidence shattered. But it could have ended so much fucking worse. If you need help getting out, seek it immediately. Leave everything behind if you have to. Things can be replaced. You can't. Anyway, thanks for reading this on Steve. Please stay wherever you move to. I don't ever want to see or hear from you again. I stole a purse. Part 1. I looked down into the leather purse I'd stolen. Not only was the designer label fake, but there wasn't a single billfold or bit of jewelry inside. The purse was empty, apart from a rubbery black bag. Whatever was inside, it was sealed tight. The round shape and heft made me think of a weight training ball, but there was something disturbingly familiar about the lumpiness of it. It made me want to throw the black rubber bag away and act like I'd never stolen from the woman in the blue dress. I would have, too, if I hadn't needed the money so badly. I started sawing away at the rubber with a knife. It was ridiculously tough, and I couldn't help but wonder what the eloquent young girl whose purse I'd snatched had been doing with such a thing. I only prayed that whatever it was worth something. When I finally ripped open the rubber, a stink like rotten meat filled my tiny apartment. Clotted gore, a swollen purple tongue, glazed eyes that stared lifelessly at my ceiling. The rubber bag contained nothing but a severed human head. I brought a hand to my mouth to hold down the vomit. But before I could dispose of the bag, a black worm-like thing slithered out of the head's eye socket. It coiled itself, sprung, and burrowed into my arm. Shrieking, I ran to the bathroom. I tugged at my shirt, fumbled for a razor to carve the thing out, but it was too late. It had wriggled inside of me, leaving only a tiny bleeding hole behind. I patted myself all over, feeling for any trace of something hard and squirming beneath my skin. Instead, I heard a voice in my head. Oh my, well, this is certainly interesting. A most unexpected turn of events. Who's there? What's happening to me? I screamed at the empty bathroom. Think of me as a passenger, just along for the ride. As long as you do as you're told, there's no need for you to get hurt. I gripped the filthy sink, splashed water on my face, and leaned in close to see if I could spot a black worm swimming in my eyeball. My hand closed around a straight razor. Get out of my head. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm inside your brain, you know. Would you like me to make you schizophrenic? Or perhaps a pedophile? How about paralyzed from the waist down? All I have to do is make a few adjustments. What are you? I gasped. What do you want? The same thing as you. To live. There was a knock at the door. I slid to the floor, clutching my skull. I couldn't believe this was happening. That'll be her then. Her? I asked helplessly. The woman you saved me from. Her organization doesn't take kindly to the existence of beings like me. And unfortunately, there's no way to extract me from a living host. Which means I'm afraid that she's here for your head. If you value your life, I suggest you run. I stole a purse. Now I'm running for my life. Part 2. The tapping on the door intensified. The squeaky doorknob twisted. I crept out of the bathroom. Careful, the black worm inside my head warned. If she sees your shadow, she'll just shoot you through the door. How do you know? I hissed. That was how she killed the host before you. Cursing under my breath, I made my way to the fire escape. The rattle of rusty metal when I lowered myself into the alley made me wince. The air reeked of piss and spilled trash, but it tasted fresher than it had in years. I rubbed at the hole where the black worm had tunneled into me, suddenly aware of how fragile this life I'd taken for granted really was. We really should find a place to change your hair and clothes. The voice inside my head commanded, and I jumped. They have many more agents than just the woman you robbed on the train. Doubtless they already know what you look like. Suddenly, everyone from the beady-eyed bald man unloading a beer keg to the goth barmaid smoking a cigarette on her break seemed suspicious, although I never could have imagined the insane situation in which I'd found myself. As a pickpocket, I had a few tricks up my sleeve. One of them was a locker in a cheap gym that held hair dye, non-prescription glasses, a change of clothes, and a wad of cash. An hour later, a clean-shaven, blonder, hipper me strolled out of the gym. What should I call you? I asked, feeling foolish. In the hive, we don't have names. But if it makes it easier for you, you can call me K1114. Okay, K, I chuckled. The silence in my head was deafening. I cleared my throat. I hope you've got a plan to keep me in one piece. That was how I found myself on a library computer, sifting through old newspaper articles. Kay had told me to look for clusters of disappearances over long periods of time and compare them to the opening dates of bars and cafes nearby. There, Kay ordered. Stop scrolling. Could you stop yelling inside my head? I grunted. It kind of hurts. Several nearby library patrons gave me an odd look and backed away from me. I'm just rather excited that I found someone who can get us out of this mess. Cafe Louisiana, established 1954, was listed at the address on the screen. According to my notes, people had gone missing nearby at a steady rate since the year after the place opened. Sitting in the Cafe Louisiana 40 minutes later, I began to suspect that all those missing persons had offended themselves after seeing the prices or hearing the music in the place. The decor looked like it hadn't been updated since 1970, and the candles stuck in wine bottles lighting made it hard to see the cockroaches that I was certain must be scurrying around in the dark. I sipped my overpriced beer, looked at my reflection in the wall-length mirror, and wondered what the hell I was doing here. What are we looking for exactly? I said to myself, or more specifically, to Kay. I'd swear I felt him squirm around my brain in irritation. Someone who doesn't get distracted, Kay reminded me, who focuses only on what they're doing as though they had no worries and all the time in the world. There were a couple people who fit the bill. A stubbly drunk staring intently at the bottom of his whiskey glass. A slim girl with an afro leafing through a notebook while she sipped red wine and took in the scene. A pale woman with long black hair working on her laptop. Eventually, the stubbly drunk started telling bad jokes to the bartender and the black-haired woman checked her phone, leaving only the slim girl in the corner. Go talk to her, Kay instructed. What do I say? I whispered into my glass. Why don't you ask her if she can help with your worm problem? I couldn't tell if Kay was serious or not. As it turned out, I didn't have to worry about an opening line. I think I know what you want. The slim girl with the afro confronted me the moment I approached her table. How? I began. Coming in here like you were looking for me. Talking to yourself. She closed her notebook neatly. You've got yourself an unwelcome guest. Ask her if she can get us documentation, money, and transport. Tell her that we will make it worth her while. I can get you everything you need. The slim girl replied before I could speak. It will just take time. Agree. Kay's shouts were like a headache. I was too curious. Who are you? Call me this. Not that it matters to you, right? A bodied waiter set an enormous glass of red wine in front of me. Drink up. Do not drink that. Are you going to listen to that worm in your brain? Dice took a deep draught of her own glass and smirked. Or are you going to listen to me? It was like I was falling into Dice's greenish golden eyes. I would have jumped off a building if she'd asked me to, but all she wanted me to do was drink. Over the next hour, I polished off 4 or 5 glasses of wine. I was vaguely aware that I was in a badly lit hipster bar on the posh side of town, that something bad had happened to me recently, and that there was a shrieking voice in the back of my head that was getting quieter. and more sluggish by the minute. But I can't remember doing anything during that entire hour except drinking wine and looking at Thais. Her skin was smooth and sweet as honey. Her wine-stained lips were like black cherries. If I hadn't failed high school English, and if I wasn't so drunk, I thought I would write a poem about her. It seemed like a brilliant idea. I staggered to my feet to flag down a waiter and ask him for a pen. All ready to talk, I sneered. No more voices in your head now, are there? Huh? I slurred. Yep, you're ready. Thais finished her own glass of wine, the same one she'd been sipping the entire evening. Your uninvited guest is enmeshed in your brain. Remember, that means it's even drunker than you are now. I wanted to talk to only you. There are a few things you should know. The room spun. I leaned back in my chair. That little black worm isn't just going to ask for favors forever. I've seen those things before. There's an outbreak of them every few centuries. Since the moment it got inside of you, that black worm has been expanding, learning everything it can from your senses and your memories. Soon, it'll start taking you over, little by little. Maybe you'll notice your hand moving on its own, or your reflexes suddenly getting faster. But by then, it's too late. When all this is over, you'll be the uninvited guest, and it will be in control. But that's horrible, I moaned. I clutched the table like a life raft, imagining dark tendrils spreading out behind my eyes. I wanted to puke. Isn't there any way to stop it? Get it back to where it came from before it has a reason to stay, I suppose. I shrugged. The Cafe Louisiana was empty now except for me, Thais, and the long-suffering waiter. She pushed in her chair and I staggered over to pay the bill. Why are you telling me all this? I asked Thais woozily. Boredom. Thais grinned. It's the worst thing about eternity. I glanced at the wall-to-wall mirror. According to its reflection, the waiter and I were alone in the bar. My eyes drifted back to Thais. Don't worry, she smiled. I won't drain you. Not while that worm is corrupting your blood. To my surprise, she took my hand and led me out into the rainy night. Only a few moments ago, her skin had mesmerized me, but now I realized it felt as chilled and lifeless as a hunk of supermarket meat. Thais looked wistfully over her shoulder at the Cafe Louisiana. It's a shame you found me here. I really like this place. The perfect spot to pick up a snack or flip through my diaries. I hadn't noticed Thais eating any snacks. It's the only way I can remember anything anymore. And besides, sometimes it's nice to reminisce about what one was doing in. Thais checked the date on her notebook. June of 1674. Maybe it was just the booze or my imagination, but it felt like the two men holding umbrellas at either end of the alley were watching us. Thais noticed it too. Come here. Suddenly she was pressing herself against me, running her unnaturally cold fingers through my hair. I felt her fangs graze my neck. My heartbeat accelerated to 11. I shut my eyes. The men's footsteps on the sidewalk as they departed, assuming we were just another drunken late-night couple. Not at all the brown-haired, bearded, solitary pickpocket they were looking for. My eyes snapped open. The streetlights reflected on Thais fangs. You're lucky that over the years I've learned some self-control. She hissed into my ear. We'd better get you back to my place. Your uninvited guest will be waking up soon. And when it does, it'll make you pay for putting you to sleep. I was terrified of Thais, but I could see the dark silhouettes of the two umbrella men in the distance. I had to trust her. I didn't have a choice. Or did I? I stole a purse. My body is no longer under my control. Part 3. During the rickety elevator ride to her apartment, Thais made a phone call. She spoke angrily to a tired man on the other end of the line in a language that I guessed was Arabic. When finished, she turned to me and smiled. Your paperwork is on the way. I hope you like the name Mateo. The elevator lurched to a stop, and my stomach lurched with it. I had to lean against the wall to make it to Thais' door, and when I stepped into her pitch-black abode, I felt something plastic crunch beneath my feet. The tarp, Thais explained, helps with the cleanup. The windows are sealed and I can see in the dark, so you'll need your own light source. I was so drunk that all that made a kind of sense. I took out my phone, shook on the flashlight, and tried to ignore the reddish stains on the plastic under my feet. Thais' house was like a museum of abandoned hobbies. She hustled me books stacked to the ceiling in unsteady columns, walls of dusty instruments, a homemade PC surrounded by generations of electronics, and a room where a pale, bloodless girl was sitting for her portrait forever. A half-finished canvas depicted her corpse, posed nude on a red sofa. When I suggested I sleep on an identical couch, I shuddered to think what might have transpired on the fabric where I was about to lay my head. Sleep, I said simply, and whether it was the booze, exhaustion, or some kind of spell, I obeyed. I kicked off my shoes, climbed onto the antique sofa, and when I turned off my phone, the room was as dark as the other side of sleep. I woke to the sensation of thumbs pressing into my eyeballs. Not Thai's or anyone else's, my own. If headaches could kill, I would have been dead. I was in too much agony to scream. Pardon me, but what the hell do you think you're doing? The voice of Kay, the black worm that had burrowed into my brain, warbled and popped like a bad recording. With a sinking feeling, I realized that it had control of my hands. In the Cafe Louisiana, Thais had told me that once it started controlling my body, I was done for. Thais said, I groaned. Thais said, Kay cut me off with a burst of pain. Did it not occur to you that maybe, just maybe, the 400-year-old homicidal vampire might be lying, toying with you, just to see what would happen? As Kay's tirade continued, I realized that I could still move my hands. With a little effort, I still wasn't convinced that Thais hadn't been wrong or lying. This might just mean that Kay's expansion inside my brain was further along than I'd thought. It might just mean that I was running out of time. The doorbell rang, and I heard Thais crawl across the ceiling to answer it. Your documents are ready, a voice in the darkness beside me whispered, only moments later. Give my regards to your uninvited guest. The apartment door stood open, casting light over the huge plastic tarp and the antique apartment. Thais were inviting me out. After the pitch-black apartment, the sun outside was blinding. I took the liberty of charging your phone and using your hands to buy our plane tickets. Kay informed me, sounding pleased with itself. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough in your account to cover the cost of a next-day flight, so I also took out a few credit cards in your name. You used my body while I slept. I groaned, as nightmarish as it was to think that Kay could take control of me the moment I drifted off. What he'd done to my bank account was no less horrifying. My stomach rumbled. A leftover kebab was the last thing I'd eat over a day ago before I'd started making the rounds of the metro and snatched that woman's damn bag. You need sustenance, Kay commented. If I may make a recommendation, I'm partial to American-style breakfast. Black coffee, 3 slices of bacon, 2 eggs over easy, hash browns, and pancakes with lots of maple syrup. At the moment, everything sounded good. And besides, I knew just the spot. It was where the hungover tourists gathered when they missed home, and it was a great place to blend in, hide out, or walk off with an unattended laptop. I can make that work, I grumbled, but can we afford it? Of course we can, as long as you put it on your new credit card. An hour later, breakfasted and somewhat more awake, we were on a metro ride to the airport. I found myself instinctively sizing people up. The college student who'd left his billfold in his back pocket, the 2 elderly missionaries who weren't watching their luggage, the backpacker who kept her iPhone in a mesh compartment. Remember, we don't want any more trouble than what we've already got, Kay warned. You're reading my... Something suddenly occurred to me. You're reading my thoughts? I no longer had to speak with Kay to communicate with it. I thought about Thais warning and a chill ran down my spine. Soon, Kay wouldn't have to wait until I fell asleep to do as he pleased with me. Soon, I would have no more control over myself than the passengers around me had over the metro we were riding in. I couldn't help it. My eyes were back to scanning the wagon for easy marks. They settled on a familiar face. If I hadn't made eye contact with her, the woman who I'd robbed probably wouldn't have noticed me. I remembered her, though, the feeling of sliding that bag off of her shoulder, the rush of smug satisfaction, the troubling weight and shape of it, then finding Kay wriggling around in the eye socket of the severed head inside. If I could, I would have taken it all back, but I didn't have time for regrets. The woman whispered something into an earpiece and reached behind her back. I didn't have to wonder what she was reaching for. A weapon to kill me. It wasn't easy to run in the stuffy, tight-packed metro. I collided with bags, barking dogs, and sweaty bodies. The more I tried to push my way through, the more resistance I faced. To make matters worse, the woman was fast. I thought I was good at weaving through a crowd, but that woman was something else. And unlike me, she wasn't panicking. Those baby blue eyes that had looked so innocent when I'd robbed her now looked like 2 cubes of ice, and they were fixed on my neck like it was the most important thing in the world. As I rammed my way into the next wagon, I saw what the woman was holding, a knife made out of something like glass, practically invisible to someone not looking for it. She slithered through the packed wagon like a snake. I just couldn't get away from her. I bounced off of the belly of a chain-draped soccer hooligan. There were 5 of them, huge sunburned pink mountains of flesh standing between me and my only escape. Just where you find your groin, then, the hooligan sneered. My eyes darted to the blue and white colors of his jersey. I felt my mouth move on its own. I just wanted to tell you that you're a fat knob and FC Chelsea is garbage. Kay had spoken for me. With a roar, the big man flung me into the middle of his friends. Hey, 2 security guards shouted. I could hear them running my way, but the hooligans' off-brand sneakers were a lot closer. I curled up like a shrimp as they battered me. Passengers were screaming. The doors beeped open as the metro came to a halt. The guards grabbed my shoulders and dragged me out of the stomp fest, and the icy-eyed woman slid her wicked glass-like dagger into her sleeve and faded into the crowd. What the hell was that? I asked Kay when we were finally out of the metro. I just saved both our lives, Kay reminded me as I staggered over to a waiting taxi. I spent as much time looking behind me as in front, terrified that the icy-eyed woman would appear again. I could already imagine the sudden puncture, the cold outtake of air as she slid the dagger between my ribs. I'd hate to see the other guy, the cab driver chucked. Only then did I realize the blood dribbling down from my mouth and nose. I checked the mirror. I looked like a walking corpse. Airport, I groaned. As the cab cruised through the rainy streets, I nursed my injuries, double-checked my travel documents, and thought about the black worm inside my head. After all, if Kay could already seize control of my mouth at will, it was only a matter of time. I stole a purse. What I found inside is taking me to Las Vegas. Part 4, Las Vegas. The truth was, I didn't know where Kay was sending me until I got to the check-in counter at the airport. I'll admit it, I was curious why a telepathic brain parasite would be interested in themed hotels, slot machines, and escort services. Why Vegas? I asked, still unused to communicating without speaking. Las Vegas is just a stopover, Kay explained. Our true destination is a place called Masquerade. That sounded like a cheerful spot. I sighed. I don't suppose you'd tell me why. Everything will be explained upon arrival, Kay informed me cheerfully. But right now we're approaching the security checkpoint, so act natural. I flashed the border control my best smile and did my best to believe I was Mateo Pujol, student, age 27. Hometown Girona. Birth date. Wait, when was my birthday supposed to be? When the tired agent stamped my false passport and waved me on, I let out a sigh of relief. Maintaining a false identity was harder than I'd imagined, especially with Kay constantly giving me advice. Could you shut up for a minute? I finally shouted. Nearby passengers looked at me in shock, and to my horror I noticed a pair of security guards looking my way and muttering into their radios. It was going to be a long flight. My parents weren't exactly the wealthy world traveling type, and this flight with Kay was my first time on a plane. I'd expected it to be bumpy, even frightening, but soon I was falling asleep in my seat. That turned out to be the most terrifying part of my flight, because when I woke up, my body was moving on its own. I'd opened my eyes to find my hands flexing and unflexing as Kay tested his control over them. Once I even woke up mid-stride, Kay was surely trying to see if he could walk me to the bathroom without my knowledge. I remembered my date with Thies and called for a flight attendant. Hey, I requested, could I get a drink? What are you doing? Kay quivered, getting a little peace and quiet. 4 beers later, Kay's groaning was finally fading into something resembling telepathic snores. While he was out cold, I flipped over a napkin and began to write. If Kay got to the point that he could read my thoughts, I needed something that I could hand to someone that would explain the whole situation. I'm infected by some kind of parasite. It's in my brain. I think it might be dangerous. Don't believe anything else I do or say, apart from what's written in this note. I stuffed the napkin into my pocket and tried to get some real sleep. I didn't wake again until our flight landed, and neither did Kay. You really must stop doing that, it groaned, as we walked through the mezzanine of the glitzy Las Vegas airport in search of a car rental. I wasn't paying attention to Kay's complaining. However, my eyes were fixed on a broad-shouldered figure on the moving walkway up ahead. There was something about his stride that I recognized. Carlos. My older brother Carlos had left home for California when I was 12, right around the time I started pickpocketing. He'd had the courage to leave our toxic family and toxic city behind. Going no contact with all of us was just the price he paid for freedom. I'd always looked up to my older brother, and he'd always looked out for me as best he could considering the circumstances. When he'd left without a goodbye, I'd wished him the best. I never imagined I'd see him again, especially not under circumstances like this. Suddenly, I felt like a kid again. I could tell Carlos about the worm. He was my older brother. He'd know what to do. I ran to catch up. That's not him, Kay screeched. His psychic voice was so intense I nearly fell over. I know what you're thinking, literally, and that is not your brother. Carlos heard my running footsteps and turned around. A grin flashed across his tan, pockmarked face, based on his designer polo shirt, shiny business shoes, and thick gold ring. He'd done well for himself. It was like a dream come true. For a second, I even forgot about Kay. It can't be. Carlos held his arms open wide. Little bro, what are you doing here? I swallowed. Oh, just traveling. Listen, Kay shrieked until I winced. There are things out there that hunt beings like me. We're rare, and they use us in powders and potions and tinctures and who knows what else. They can smell us a mile away. The thing you're talking to looks like your brother, because that's what you want it to look like. We've got to catch up, man. How about I buy you a coffee? Carlos jabbed his thumb over his shoulder at an airport cafe. I nodded and followed his lead, or tried to. Every step was a huge effort, because Kay was making my own muscles work against me. In a minute, that thing is going to try to get you alone. You'll see. Then it'll suck me out of your head and leave you dead in the process. Don't go anywhere with it. Oh, hang on a minute. Carlos frowned and looked down at his carry-on. I gotta take my medication and use the bathroom. How about you come with me to keep an eye on my suitcase? He nodded to an abandoned-looking airport bathroom. It was between terminals. The lights were half out. We'd be the only ones in there for sure. I stammered. I can watch your suitcase from right here, can't I? Then we can go grab that coffee. For a moment, Carlos' face seemed to change, to twist into something horrible and hideous. Come on, man. I need some stuff from in there. Pills I gotta take. It'll only take a sec. Come on, don't you want to reconnect with your older brother? I did, more than anything, but this wasn't him. Seeing you again brings back so many memories. Remember when you tried to teach me to skateboard and I broke my arm? I laughed. Of course, how could I forget? Carlos grinned wider and my blood ran cold. No such thing had ever happened. Almost unconsciously, I reached out to touch him. My fingers passed right through where his sunburned, hairy forearms should have been. They passed through and touched something that felt as gnarled, scabbed, and inhuman as diseased tree roots. I backed away and Carlos lifted an eyebrow. What's wrong, little bro? Hey. I sprinted down the moving walkway, jostling other passengers out of the way as I went. I was afraid to look back over my shoulder, afraid of what might be following me. That was close. You have got to listen to me, Kay rambled. There's a whole other world beneath the surface of the one you think you know, and it's dangerous. We're alive, aren't we? I sulked. Let's go rent that car. It wasn't easy to talk my way through the rental process. Not only did I keep forgetting Mateo Puejal's basic information, but I also kept getting this hair-raising feeling on the back of my neck. When I turned around, my brother Carlos' face was watching me from across the glittering lobby. It was twisted into a hungry smile, one I was sure that only I could see. I stole a purse. I'll never sleep again after what I learned at Masquerade. Final. Kay and I drove in silence through the bleak Nevada canyons. The sunset turned the landscape a burnt orange color that reminded me of paintings of hell. For all I knew, maybe that's where the black worm in my brain was taking me. There's something you should know before we get to our destination. Kay spoke inside my head suddenly, and I nearly swerved off of the deserted road. Remember the agent, the blue-eyed woman who tried to kill you? I wasn't likely to forget in a hurry, but there was no need to tell Kay that. There's a chance, a very small chance, but a chance nonetheless, that her organization has guessed our next move. If that's the case, there will be a very nasty surprise waiting for us at Masquerade. Great, I thought. Kay replied with the psychic equivalent of a shrug. I kept forgetting that it could read my thoughts. What's going to happen when we reach Masquerade? I'll reconnect with the hive. And you, well, you'll get your body back. I couldn't tell if Kay was lying or not. It didn't seem like it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something that Kay wasn't telling me. The road stretched straight ahead for as far as I could see. It was a struggle not to fall asleep. Maybe that's why my eyes fixated on the broken-down silver BMW on the side of the road. In the glow of the headlights, I saw that the passenger side door hung wide open. I slowed down. What are you doing? Kay asked. There's no gas or water for miles. That person might need help. I responded. They don't need help. How could you possibly know that? If they broke down here, they're beyond help. Kay forced my foot to press down on the accelerator, and as we sped by the abandoned car, I glimpsed the green glowing eyes of a huge coyote beside it. A coyote that stood on two legs. These deserts are the last great empty space in this country. All sorts of things come out here to play and to hunt. Kay went on, but I wasn't listening. I was thinking about how easily Kay had moved my foot against my will. At some point on this endless night drive, we had passed a tipping point. Kay now had more control over my body than I did. I was so distracted that I forgot how fast I was going. A few hours later, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. With Kay's usual warning to act natural and a terrified lump in my throat, I pulled to the side of the abandoned highway. What if it was the blue-eyed woman, disguised as a police officer? What if they realized my documents were false? Only one of the two officers even bothered to leave the cruiser. A sunburned rookie with a ginger flat-top haircut approached my door with a scowl. I handed him my documents. "Where did you head so late at night, sir?" the rookie asked. "Camping trip. I'm a big astronomy geek, and I hear the stars are great out here," Kay answered for me. To my surprise, the rookie nodded like it was an answer he heard often. I still wasn't used to the feeling of words that weren't mine coming out of my mouth, and it must have shown. The officer had been about to let us go, but suddenly he bent down beside the door. "Do you have anything you want to tell me, sir?" I drummed my finger on the note in my pocket. "I'm infected by some kind of parasite. It's in my brain. I think it might be dangerous. Don't believe anything else I do or say, apart from what's written in this note. That would definitely get the officer's attention. If I didn't think, if I handed it off before Kay could react." I thought about mental institutions, the smell of sterile lab instruments, the woman with ice blue eyes. I moved my hand away. "Not that I can think of," I finally replied. After a long look, the rookie handed back my documents, and I silently thanked this counterfeiter for the incredible job that they'd done. It wasn't long before brown road signs announced that we were entering Massacre Rim WMA. It didn't feel like driving into the Old West. It felt like driving into prehistory. Kay directed me down potholed dirt tracks that the car rental company would never have approved, apparently guided by some sort of internal compass. Soon, we'd left behind even the occasional stray headlights of the highway. The desert around us was as dark as the bottom of the sea and still kept me driving. Sage bushes scraped against the underside of the car. I gripped the wheel with white knuckles as we lurched over crumbling mounds of red rocks and around massive clumps of dry brush. Finally, I felt Kay push my foot down on the brake. Here, I didn't realize how tense I'd been until I stepped out into the cool desert air. Then I looked up and my breath caught in my throat. I didn't know there could be so many stars. They were scattered across the sky like diamond dust, surrounded by clouds of blue and purple that I'd never seen in the city. I was looking at the Milky Way. As I stared in awe, an Inkai sphere cut across that beautiful vision of space. Just looking at it made my head hurt, and I got the feeling that it existed in more than 4 dimensions. It lowered itself onto the red dirt in front of me, oozing out across the desert like a thick liquid, and only then did I realize what I was looking at. Beings like Kay, billions of them. "You've been incredibly helpful," Kay told me. "We've been on several fact-finding missions among your species over the centuries, with inconclusive results. But now, thanks to you, we can confirm that Homo sapiens are selfish enough to guarantee our spread." "What?" I gasped. "Not all species make good hosts. Among more individualistic species, the infected usually wander off to die alone, rather than infecting others. In more hierarchical species, the infected warn the authorities about their condition, regardless of the cost to themselves. Think about how you reacted to your infestation. All you wanted was to live, and that's exactly the trait we're looking for. With the new data I've gleaned from your thoughts, I estimate about 4 weeks before half of the hominid population is infested, and 3 to 5 months until complete infestation. You will, indeed, make excellent hosts for the hive. I suppose we're just lucky that we found you before you destroyed yourselves." It was too much. I fell to my knees before the ink pool of squirming worm-like creatures. "Unfortunately, it is now time for us to part. I must share what I've learned from you with the hive. Perhaps we'll meet again, but it's statistically unlikely." I felt something slithering beside my right eyeball, and Kay disappeared into the writhing black pool. Searchlights zoomed across the desert toward us, mounted on black Humvees. I had no doubt that the woman with ice blue eyes was there, shouting commands into a walkie-talkie. I ran. Behind me, streams of something like that looked like fireworks and smelled like a chemical factory rocketed toward Kay and the hive. But I didn't stick around to see what happened. I had no doubt that if I inhaled that thick white smoke, I'd be hospitalized or worse. Alone in the chilly desert night, without signal, water, or shelter, I did my best to follow narrower tracks to larger ones. To my surprise, I soon saw a pair of ordinary-looking headlights making their way cautiously toward me across the jagged desert landscape. a police cruiser from before. I figured I should hide, but I didn't have the energy. Besides, without water or transport, I wouldn't last long past sunrise. The ginger-headed rookie cautiously rolled down his window. You said you were coming out here to see the stars and go camping, but there wasn't a telescope or a tent in that shiny rental car of yours. He glared at me. We thought that was strange, so I called it in, and then all hell broke loose. If you're willing to tell me exactly what's going on out here, I might be willing to give you a ride into town. With no reports filed, we got a deal, the rookie's grim-faced partner asked as he opened the rear door. We expect full cooperation, and I warn you, it's a long ride. My muscles tensed. I waited for Kay to step in, to stop me, to take control of my mouth or legs. Nothing. I was alone inside my own head, and my choices were my own. That's okay, I sighed. It's a long story. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, then hit the like. See you guys next time.